My name is Karlyn Borysenko, and this is the Actively Unwoke podcast. So, in my book, Actively Unwoke, The Ultimate Guide for Fighting Back Against Woke Insanity in Your Life, I have a whole chapter where I do a take on Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, and I created my own set of rules that I think are the most valuable things that we need to know when we're fighting back against all this woke insanity in our daily lives. And so, of course, my rule number one, just like the First Amendment, is going to be what I consider to be our top tier value, the one that should not be compromised on, the most important thing we need to know. And that rule is know your values. And I want to read what this section of the book says to you just under this rule number one, because it's really pertinent to what I see going on specifically in Florida right now. And to be quite frank, it really gives me misgivings what Ron DeSantis and the Republicans are doing in Florida. Now, listen, before I get any crying or complaining from conservatives on this podcast, which I know I will get inevitably, generally speaking, I like Ron DeSantis. Generally speaking, I'm appreciative of the legislative actions that he's taken in Florida in regards to the Stop Woke Act and the Parental Rights and Education Act. I think those things are fine. I will have no problem with them at all. Where I start to have a little bit of an issue, though, is when the state government openly and brazenly retaliates against a private business because that private business expressed speech that the government doesn't like. And that's exactly what's going on in Florida right now. Whether people want to hear it or not, when Ron DeSantis and the Republicans in Florida used the power of the government, full legislation, to retaliate against Disney for speech that Disney had that was critical of the government and of the Parental Rights and Education Act, they used the government to retaliate against speech they didn't like. And it really leaves a sour taste in my mouth. And I know not everyone's going to agree with me. They're going to say, Karlyn, Disney was grooming children. What do you expect us to do? Well, if you become just like the woke left, then you are no different than the woke left. Then there is no point in fighting them. If you're just going to do the same things when you get into power, then the only purpose of fighting back against the woke left is just that, to achieve power. And that makes us no different than they are. We need to be fighting for something stronger, something that matters, something that will have lasting value, the values that this country was built on. And that's why know your values is my number one rule for fighting back against the woke. Here's the section of the book. Friedrich Nietzsche says, beware that, when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become the monster. For when you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. Actually, there are at least a dozen slightly different versions of this quote floating around, but the point remains the same. When you are fighting evil, be careful that you yourself don't take on the qualities of the evil you're fighting. Sometimes we have to dabble in their squalor, but that doesn't mean we have to become them. That would defeat the entire purpose. In the early part of my journey in the land of the politically homeless, I gravitated towards the Make America Great Again MAGA movement, and eventually ended up doing something I never thought I would do in my life. I ended up supporting Donald Trump for re-election. The clincher for me was when he banned critical race theory via executive order from all federal agencies and contractors. He was the only person to take action against it at that large of a scale. It was our first truly grand victory. Not only has Joe Biden since rescinded those executive orders, he's also actively working to integrate critical race theory in every part of the federal bureaucracy, including cementing it in schools through the Department of Education. It's important to say here that I don't particularly care if you supported Donald Trump or not, if you think he really won or he didn't. None of those things matter anymore, and we have to come together to fight the greater menace. Bickering over which presidential candidate a person supported only allows the woke to win and distracts everyone from the larger fight. However, I have to say something that will annoy the Trump haters out there. The MAGA movement during the 2020 election was one of the most amazing positive experiences of my life. There was so much love. I've never experienced anything like it. I'm not talking about the politicians. I'm talking about the average people, the voters, the group of people who has been characterized as horrible, evil, racist, and white supremacist turned out to be some of the nicest people in the world. After the election, and especially after January 6th, things began to change. And after the inauguration of Joe Biden, I watched as so many people on the political right slowly turned into the monsters they were fighting. They started to become so reactionary to anything the left did, especially their most hated politician, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that it became completely distracting from the larger picture. One of the most pronounced incidents came when there was a concerted effort to cancel Chrissy Teigen. Now, I'm not a Teigen fan by any stretch. However, all of a sudden, there was a massive campaign led by some of the most well-known influencers on the right for tweets she had sent years before. Now, granted, her tweets were absolutely bullying, and it wasn't the only time she behaved badly. But no matter how you paint it, going after her 2 years after the fact wasn't for the principle. It was for revenge. And even worse, if you spoke up against it, you were attacked. A classic social justice warrior SJW tactic to suppress dissent. So many people who disagreed with it just kept quiet. Now, this is not to say the entire right has become the monster they're fighting. They haven't. But a portion of them have. And it has only hurt the greater picture. Sadly, the conservative influencers, typically the ones with a blue check on Twitter, have a more vested interest in making their audience angry than they do in fixing the problem. We have to be better than them. We have to keep our eye on the prize. Every time we allow ourselves to be distracted by petty battles like complaining about Jill Biden being called Dr. Biden or complaining about the latest lie AOC has told, the woke use it as a chance to make progress, and we've just lost ground. Even when you have to fight, even when you have to get aggressive, even when you have to use their own tactics against them, you also have to be able to look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and know you did it for a reason. You achieved some positive movement, even if it's just a sliver of an inch. We're fighting to protect freedom of speech for everyone, not just for people we agree with. We're fighting to make sure that everyone can participate in the discussion and that dissent is permitted without cancellation. We're fighting for a true marketplace of ideas, one that utilizes debate instead of censorship and intimidation. We're fighting for children to be able to go to school and learn how to think, not what to think. We're fighting because every time a child is told they can't achieve success in the world because of their skin color, that is child abuse. And it's happening in your local public school every day. We're fighting for people to be able to support whatever political party they like without risking their job. We're fighting to make sure people have the freedom to think and consider ideas and can even retain the right to change their mind based on new information. We're fighting for a society in which we celebrate all of the progress we've made over the last 250 plus years while still acknowledging that things aren't perfect and they are still areas for improvement without being forced to say the country is foundationally racist. We're fighting for the things the ACLU used to fight for, the most deplorable speech to still be protected. Because when you protect the worst of the worst, you protect free speech for everyone. And really, offensive speech is the only kind of speech that needs protection anyway. No one is going to demand cancellation for people they agree with. Whatever you're fighting for, make sure you have a really clear picture of it in your head and hold yourself accountable to those values. Take a few minutes, before you move on and write notes about why this fight is important to you. Every time that going gets rough, go back to your why. Remind yourself why your why is important and make sure you're holding yourself accountable to those values. There's so much noise out there. Do not allow the nonsense to distract you by keeping your values and your why top of mind. I really think that people on the right, not all of them, but enough, are beginning to become the monster they're fighting. We're seeing it in Florida, where you might agree with the government in Florida and you might hate Disney with the fury of a thousand suns. But what we should be able to agree on is that government retaliation against a private company for political speech that is protected by the First Amendment, that the government does not like, is not acceptable. Because if a government that you like can retaliate against speech it doesn't like, then guess what? It can be used against you too. I was laying in bed this morning, just kind of thinking. That's what I do in the mornings. I kind of lay in bed and I do Twitter. I find out what's going on in the world and I just kind of think for a little while before the day starts to get crazy. And it occurred to me that, you know, I don't think when I left the left after being a Democrat for 20 years, my decision to leave the left was not based on the fact that my values had changed. My values have never changed. Even going through the evolution of kind of being aligned with the conservatives and the GOP, and now I'm in the Libertarian Party and I'm extremely happy there. Throughout my entire journey, my values never changed. And the number one reason that I left the left was because A, I thought that they no longer stood for the values that I cared about. But B, it was because I was absolutely disgusted with the tactics that they were using and the constant attacks on free speech and dissent. But what I didn't realize, I think, until this morning is that many, though not all, but many of the people that I ended up aligning with on the political right, they never really opposed the tactics of the left. They never really opposed the tactics. They just opposed that, quite frankly, the left was playing the game better than they were. The left knew how to play the game and the left knew how to win. And that was what bothered their opponents, not the tactics, not the attacks on free speech. Because I look around at the political right today, which is supposed to be the opposition, supposed to be the counterculture. And I see them employing exactly the same tactics of the left as soon as they gain power. They cancel people. They dig into people's tweets. They bring up things that happened years ago. They use the full force of the government to retaliate against speech that they don't like, that just happens to be critical of the government that they have control over. This is a problem. It's a problem. If we aren't going to stand for freedom of speech and the ability to dissent in front of the most powerful people in the country, then what do we stand for, guys? We have to keep this in mind. We have to know why we started this fight in the first place. Because if you take an authoritarian group out of power and you replace them with another authoritarian group, you haven't really changed anything. I got into this fight to protect free speech. If you disagree with me, if you think I'm a horrible person, if you think I stand against everything you hold dear, I want you to be able to say that and scream it from the top of your lungs without the government retaliating against you. And I don't want you to be canceled. I have a very strong track record of not sending my community and my followers after people who criticize me. In fact, I tell them not to go after them. I want you to be able to say what you want to say no matter whether you agree with me or not. What I'm beginning to understand is that is a rare and valuable commodity. Whether you're on the right or you're on the left, it doesn't really seem to matter. A lot of people, maybe I'm having a little bit of a black pill moment here. I'm working it out live on the internet. But for most people, I think that they've lost the plot, and I think that they've lost why this fight is important in the first place. If we are simply retaliating against the left because they made us miserable for years, then we're no better than them. And I think in order to truly win and in order to truly turn back woke nonsense in this country, we have to be better for them. We have to stand for something higher. We have to stand for something more powerful. And we have to be absolutely uncompromising in our values and our principles. I have no desire to replace a woke left with a woke right. One authoritarian is no better or worse than any other authoritarian. We have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to know that diversity of thought, the ability to dissent, the ability to brainstorm, the ability to have creative ideas, the ability to shitpost on Twitter or anywhere else. Those are things that are worth protecting, and those are the things that make this country great and make it stand apart. No other country in the world has a First Amendment. America is the only one. People in Canada don't understand our First Amendment. People in England do not understand our First Amendment. People all over the world do not understand our First Amendment because their governments can censor their speech, retaliate against them for their speech anytime they want to, and they do. What we have is truly unique and truly special. And does it necessitate more discussion and convincing people of your ideas? Yes. But that is the entire point. No authoritarians are welcome here. No retaliation for speech is welcome here. I won't have it. I won't have it as part of the communities that I build. Disagreement is fine, but disagreement is not the same thing as stifling dissent. It is not the same thing as saying, well, Karlyn, a free speech, it has consequences, which I was literally told by a conservative less than an hour ago. That's something the woke left says, guys. The woke left says, it's not cancellation, it's just accountability. And now the conservative right is starting to say, well, free speech is fine, but, it has consequences. And if you speak out against the government, then you should expect the government to come after you. I don't think that what happened in Florida is right. I understand the sentiment. I liked the gumption of it. And I was tricked at first too until I kind of sat down and thought about it and realized that retaliation for speech that is not my particular cup of tea doesn't make us any better than the people that we're fighting. Please be better. Principles only mean something when you apply them when they are inconvenient. All right, guys, that's all I have for this time around. Hey, as of this recording, we are exactly 2 weeks away from the release of Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against woke insanity in your life. You can order your copy on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, independent booksellers, wherever you buy books, you can probably get the book. If you want to head over to activelyunwoke.com, you can find a list of places you can pre-order it and join my book club that I'm going to be running after we get through pre-sale. And yeah, it's going to be good. I'm really excited. Okay, guys, that's all for right now. We'll see you soon.